Wait, stop scrolling for a second. What if I told you someone around you might not be controlling you directly, but still controlling how you think without you even realizing it? Not with force, not with shouting, not even with obvious manipulation, but through silent psychological patterns that feel completely normal. And the most dangerous part, you don't notice it happening, because it feels like your own thoughts. In the next few minutes, you'll discover 7 hidden psychological tricks people use in everyday life, and how to recognize them before they shape your mind. Stay till the end, because number 7 can completely change how you see people forever. Let's get something clear first. Most people imagine manipulation as something loud and obvious: arguments, pressure, threats, or direct control. But real psychological influence doesn't work like that. It's quiet, subtle, almost invisible. It slips into your thoughts in a way that feels natural, like it was your own idea all along. That's what makes it so powerful. Psychology itself isn't good or bad, it's just a tool. But in the wrong hands, it becomes invisible control over perception, emotion, and decision-making. And once you start recognizing how it works, you can never fully unsee it again. First sign, they make you doubt your own memory. You say something clearly happened, with confidence, with detail, with emotion, but they instantly shut it down. That never happened. Not, I don't remember, not, maybe, but a firm denial that attacks your certainty. You try to explain again and again, but they keep repeating the opposite version until your confidence starts breaking down. Slowly, you begin to pause before speaking. You start thinking twice about your own experiences, and that's exactly the effect. Because once a person can make you question your memory, they don't need to control you directly anymore. You start doing the control yourself, by doubting your own mind, your own judgment, and even your own reality. This is not just disagreement. This is psychological distortion at its deepest level, where confidence turns into confusion and confusion turns into dependency. Second sign, hot and cold behavior. One moment they're warm, attentive, even overly kind, making you feel valued and important. Then suddenly, without explanation, they become distant, cold, or completely ignore you. No warning, no clarity. This inconsistency is not random. It creates confusion in your mind. Your brain starts to focus on the good version of them and begins chasing it. You replay conversations, overthink your actions, and ask yourself, what did I do wrong? This emotional uncertainty forms a cycle of reinforcement, where your attention becomes locked on their approval. It's not real love or genuine connection. It's psychological conditioning that keeps you emotionally hooked and mentally dependent. Third sign, subtle guilt traps. You try to say no or set a simple boundary, but instead of respect, you get emotional pressure. They don't argue directly or force you. Instead, they use guilt. Phrases like, I thought you cared, or it's okay, I'll manage alone, quietly shift the responsibility onto you. Suddenly, your boundary feels selfish, even wrong. You start questioning your own decision, not because it is incorrect, but because your emotions are being redirected, and in that moment, your no weakens. This is how psychological influence works through guilt. Soft, indirect, and powerful, enough to make you abandon your own limits without realizing it. Fourth sign, control through confusion. During an argument, you try to stay focused on one clear issue, but somehow the conversation shifts. The topic changes, the blame shifts, and suddenly you're not even talking about what started it. You find yourself defending things you never intended to discuss, losing track of the original point. By the end, you feel mentally exhausted and think, wait, how did we even get here? That confusion isn't accidental, it's strategic. Because when your mind becomes overloaded and unclear, your ability to resist or argue back weakens. Confused thinking creates emotional fatigue, and in that state, control becomes easier without you even realizing it. Fifth sign, isolation effect. They don't force you to cut people off directly. Instead, it happens slowly and subtly, through suggestions and emotional framing. Comments like, they don't really understand you like I do, or I don't think they're good for you, start to plant doubt about your other relationships. At first, it feels caring, even protective, like someone is looking out for you. But over time, these small suggestions create distance between you and others. You start spending less time with friends or family and more time relying on them emotionally. Gradually, your perspective narrows, your social support weakens, and when that happens, your reference point becomes only one source, their version of reality. That's when psychological influence becomes strongest, because isolation increases dependency, and dependency reduces independent thinking. Sixth sign, validation withdrawal. They start controlling your emotional environment through approval and silence. When you behave in a way they like, they respond with warmth, attention, or praise, making you feel accepted and valued. But the moment you don't meet their expectations, the energy changes. They withdraw, become distant, or emotionally unavailable. This inconsistency creates a powerful psychological pattern in your mind. You begin to notice what gets approval and what doesn't, and slowly adjust your behavior to avoid losing their attention. Without realizing it, you start shaping your words, actions, and even personality just to maintain their positive response. This is not natural connection, it is reinforcement-based conditioning. Your brain begins to associate approval with safety and withdrawal with discomfort, pushing you to perform for emotional stability. Over time, you stop acting freely and start reacting strategically, just to keep their validation. This is how emotional dependency is formed, quietly, repeatedly, and without obvious force. Seventh sign, and the most dangerous one, identity shift. At this stage, the influence is no longer external, it becomes internal. You start noticing subtle but disturbing changes in yourself. The things you used to like don't feel the same anymore. Your opinions begin to shift, not because you explored or grew naturally, but because you started adjusting them to avoid conflict or gain approval. Even your personality feels slightly different, like you're editing yourself in real time depending on who you're around. The most alarming part is that it doesn't feel forced. It feels like adaptation. You tell yourself you're just becoming more flexible, more understanding, more compatible. But slowly, you begin to lose track of where you end and where the other person's expectations begin. Your reactions, your choices, even your emotional responses start aligning with what keeps the peace or maintains connection. Over time, the original version of you becomes quieter. Not gone, but buried. And because this change happens gradually, your mind doesn't register it as manipulation. It feels normal, even logical. That's what makes it so powerful. Because when someone can influence your identity without resistance, you stop noticing the control completely. Now here's the truth most people miss. Not every shift in behavior around you is manipulation, and not every difficult interaction is a hidden strategy. But your brain has one constant job. It adapts. It adjusts to environments, people, emotions, and patterns automatically, whether they are healthy or not. That's how psychology works at its core. Silent, fast, and efficient. It doesn't wait for logic to approve. It reacts to repetition and emotion. This is why people can slowly get used to toxic patterns without even realizing it. The mind normalizes what it experiences repeatedly, even when it shouldn't. But here's the turning point most people ignore. Awareness interrupts automation. The moment you start observing your own reactions instead of just living inside them, something changes. You create space between stimulus and response, and in that space, control returns. Because once you can see a pattern clearly, you are no longer fully inside it. You stop reacting blindly and start responding consciously. That shift alone weakens emotional influence, breaks automatic conditioning, and restores your sense of choice. Awareness doesn't fix everything instantly, but it ends unconscious control. So next time something feels off, don't rush to react. Don't try to force an answer. And don't let emotion decide the meaning for you. Just pause and observe what is actually happening without adding fear or assumptions on top of it. Because awareness is your strongest defense. Not anger, not arguments, not emotional reaction, but clear observation of patterns as they are. Clarity gives you distance. Distance gives you control. And control gives you choice. And remember this simple truth. People can influence your emotions in many ways, but only when you are unaware of the pattern behind it. The moment you start recognizing how a situation is shaping your thoughts and reactions, the automatic control begins to weaken. Once you can see it clearly, you are no longer reacting inside the pattern. You are observing it from outside, and in that space of awareness, you regain yourself. Stay aware when something feels off. Don't react blindly or overthink, just observe. Awareness breaks emotional influence and reveals patterns. Not anger or confrontation, but clarity gives real control. People can only affect your emotions when you don't recognize what's happening. Once you see the pattern clearly, you regain control instantly.